All right, here we go. I think I painted that face. That is not actually Donald Trump. I think I painted that. Donald Trump is in free fall this morning. Half of Donald Trump's net worth is tied up in Truth Social stock, which just hit an all-time low, selling for less than $20 a share on Wednesday, down 70% from when it first opened in March. If you're a MAGA moron, let it all ride. Let it all ride on Trump's Truth Social stock. Now, legally, enough time will have passed by October that Trump would be allowed to sell those shares. But the mere act of selling those shares would drive the price down, meaning his stake in the company is worth more on paper than it actually is. Again, this is a company that never turned a profit. Nobody uses Truth Social. The number of viewers on Truth Social has dropped 40% this year. Why is this important? Well, Donald Trump's former attorney, Ty Cobb, said he expects the Republican presidential nominee, Donald Trump, to be sentenced to as many as 9 years in prison for attempting to overturn the 2020 election. Cobb made those comments in response to special counsel Jack Smith unsealing brand new superseding indictments on Tuesday, indictments that Smith believes conforms to the Supreme Court's ruling back in June on presidential immunity. Earlier in the week, I told my listeners not to get ahead of themselves on Trump going to prison. I told them to be realistic. I said, steel yourself for the possibility that the road to prison could take as much as 6 to 7 years from now. I went over Contragate and how trials were still going on 7 years after that story first broke, and the trials would have gone on even longer than 7 years had President George Herbert Walker Bush not shut down the entire investigation of Contragate by issuing blanket pardons. I warned that a Harris victory doesn't automatically mean Trump is getting locked up anytime soon, especially since he has hundreds of millions of dollars at his disposal, a bottomless source of contributions to his super PAC that he can spend on lawyers, even though nobody's quite sure whether that's legal. But what we saw Monday at Arlington Cemetery, I think, changes a lot. It is a precursor of much to come leading up to Election Day, because his behavior, his campaign staff's behavior at Arlington Cemetery had echoes of January 6. One could argue, politically speaking, this is almost as bad as January 6th because there's a bipartisan disgust with this behavior. Not everybody thinks Congress is hallowed sacred ground. Everybody in America believes, Republican, Democrat, Arlington Cemetery is sacred ground. This is, I think, is really bad. Now, he can do possibly worse. But what if he just keeps going the way he is? There are 66 days until the election. On today's show, Donald Trump in free fall. What if Donald Trump's behavior at Arlington signals a precipitous drop into a void that ends in abject humiliation for him on November 5th? How much will that embolden his enemies? How much money will then be at his disposal to keep himself out of prison? If Jack Smith, the special counsel, indicts him for wire fraud, which I'm told Jack Smith is prepared to do, if Jack Smith indicts Donald Trump for wire fraud, charging him with raising hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars to investigate voter fraud, but instead using that money to pay lawyers, his wife's stylist, and maintenance on his jet. If Jack Smith does what I think he's going to do after the election and try Donald Trump for wire fraud, well, this could be a shorter road to prison. Trump is set to be worth $5 billion. Now, half of that is in the aforementioned Truth Social stock, and we know it's worthless. The other half of his fortune is in real estate that is mortgaged up to the hilt. On paper, he's worth $5 billion. We know that after he was ordered to post that $500 million bond after being found guilty this year for defrauding lenders, his lawyers literally said to the judge, "We do not have the money. It is impossible to raise that kind of money. He does not have the cash." And the judge agreed to lower the bond, cut it in half. And even then, Trump had trouble finding it, securing somebody to give him a bond. Donald Trump announced today that he is now selling Trump trading cards with pieces of the suit he was wearing during the CNN debate with Joe Biden. Does that sound like a man who has money? Donald Trump is in free fall this morning, and I'm not sure he pulls out of it. Kamala Harris gave her big interview on CNN last night. Some of my listeners are accusing her of coming off fuzzy on the issues. I know we all want her to be Bernie, but first she needs to win, and then we need to push her to the left the way we pushed Joe Biden to the left. But right now, this election, I'm sorry to say, is not about the issues. It should be. Now, it's partly about women, abortion, and reproductive freedom. But Donald Trump is desperately out of control, and he can't help but make this election a referendum on himself. So I would call Kamala Harris's judgment into question if she started going into specifics. There's an election to be won, and specifics only give Donald Trump and the entire Republican Party more ammunition to lie. This election, whether you like it or not, is a referendum on Donald Trump. And because he is now in free fall, we are looking at a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to rewrite electoral politics in this country. On today's show, I review Kamala Harris's post-convention bounce in the polls. This is the mop-up for August 30th, 2024. Thank you so much for finding me. I'm David Feldman in New York City. Please subscribe to my channel, and you know the drill. I apologize. I'll get right to the show in a second, but please like this episode so that I remain in your feed, and share this episode, please. That's the only way you can help me, is by sharing this episode. If you would like a free transcript of today's show, go to shopdavidfeldman.com. The transcripts are free. We have a couple of other freebies over there, like a free Harvard diploma. And those transcripts are free thanks to the idiots who buy crap at shopdavidfeldman.com, like my Still a Democrat coffee mug, my Made in Los Estados Unidos coffee mug, my coffee mug with Albert Einstein's face saying I'm surrounded by idiots, and my worst case scenario map. It's on a mug now, so you can just, whenever you get nervous and you think Donald Trump might win, all Kamala Harris needs is 270 electoral votes. It's on the mug to calm you down. It shows you why there's nothing to worry about. You can buy it over at shopdavidfeldman.com. Or if you want to remind me who I really am, you can pick up the chef's apron with the words emblazoned, "I hope you're in the mood for diarrhea." Go ahead, break my heart. It's my #1 seller. You all want to remind me that I'm a fraud, that I haven't cultivated a sophisticated audience. Break my heart. Labor Day is upon us, and Donald Trump has until September 10th to turn this around. And he's betting it all on the September 10th ABC debate. That's what I'm hearing. Now, they just agreed on the ground rules. No audience and microphones will be muted, which means Trump won't be able to talk over Kamala Harris, which means when ABC, like CNN, won't correct Donald Trump's lies, Kamala Harris won't be interrupted by Donald Trump when she does. I am hearing reports from within the Trump camp that Trump knows he's losing. He's desperate. He's actually doing debate prep because he is convinced that the only way to salvage this campaign is by delivering a knockout blow on September 10th. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. We're having a watch party. After that debate, when the polling doesn't budge, his free fall will gain momentum, pick up speed. We will see polling in battleground states by mid-September that will make him even sicker than he already is in the head. His ego will soon begin to block out the sun. If he can't turn this around by September 10th, this election will not ever be about abortion, reproductive freedom, the economy, Gaza, Ukraine, Russian interference in our democracy, the eviction crisis, or COVID. Trump's behavior, the kind we saw at Arlington Cemetery on Monday, will only get worse. And yes, such a thing is possible. Trump can get even worse. We learned that on January 6th. So this election after the debate will be exactly what Donald Trump's enfeebled mind wants it to be about: him and only him. And the polling I'm now looking at says that 1 month from now, when we're heading into October, there will be a faint chorus from deep within the Republican Party politely calling for Donald Trump to be taken off the ticket. Now, he will never go. He won't agree, but there will be ever so slight whispers in the Republican Party on how we need to get him to step aside because he's dragging us all down, and he won't go. Like Hitler in the bunker, Donald Trump's taking everyone and everything down with him. And if you don't believe me, January 6th, he sat and ate a cheeseburger and watched Fox News as his maggots stormed the Capitol. Now, there is the possibility, the remote possibility, he figures out some way to turn this around. People always say Trump finds a way to survive. Let me correct you on this. Trump is not a survivor. He's only found a way to stay out of jail. That's it. He lost in 2020. He lost the E. Jean Carroll trial. He lost the civil fraud trial. He loses lawsuits constantly. He's a convicted felon, found guilty on 34 felony counts in that Manhattan criminal trial. He declares bankruptcy all the time. You've got to stop saying he always seems to survive. He always pulls it out at the last minute. No! All Trump ever succeeds at winning is staying out of jail. And yes, he won 2016, but he didn't want to win 2016. He wanted to keep all the money. He didn't want to win in 2016, so he lost. He lost the popular vote, and he lost the election because he did not want to win in 2016. All he's ever succeeded in is staying out of jail and winning the Republican nomination in 2016, 2020, and 24. That's it. That's it. And when he loses as badly as it now looks like he's going to lose, I believe his legal problems will escalate. I believe his attorney, Ty Cobb, who I mentioned at the top of the show, I believe Ty Cobb knows more than I do. And we may be looking at his going to prison maybe a lot quicker than the roadmap I spelled out for you earlier in the week. Ty Cobb, the Georgia Peach, that's what they call this lawyer, Ty Cobb, knows more than I do. He says he was Trump's lawyer. Ty Cobb says Trump is looking at as much as 9 years in prison, and it's going to happen sooner than later. But that behavior at Arlington on Monday, besides being illegal, was so desperate, so grotesque, so over the top. I think after the election, once he's no longer politically viable, he is going to be getting exactly what he deserves. I'm not sure he's going to be able to tap into the hundreds of millions of dollars from his super PAC to pay those lawyers. I'm also not so sure the Supreme Court will be as solicitous to him after there's no longer any chance he's ever returning to the Oval Office. I never forgot this. It was back in May. Judge Juan Merchan presided over that Manhattan criminal trial where a jury found Trump guilty on 34 felony counts. And by the way, Judge Merchan is about to be subpoenaed by Trump's toady, Jim Jordan, chairman of the House Judiciary Committee. Jordan is desperately trying to prove Juan Merchan was biased because his daughter does consulting work for the Democratic Party. Well, during that trial, I never forgot this, when Judge Merchan was issuing gag orders and trying to control Trump's rabid behavior, Judge Merchan, while he was scolding Trump, he literally said, "I should put you in jail, but I can't because you're the Republican nominee for president." And I never forgot that. It sticks with me because as much as we pretend our criminal justice system rises above politics, we all know it doesn't. We know six of the three conservative. I'm sorry. There is a 6-3 conservative majority on the Supreme Court. Right. And they are knee-deep in politics, especially Clarence Thomas and Samuel Alito. Clarence Thomas's wife helped organize the Stop the Steal rally, and Samuel Alito's wife was hanging the American flag upside down in the lead up to Biden's inauguration. She was signaling a nation in distress, and then she also had an appeal to heaven flag. But what if some of those rulings that we saw, like the one in June on immunity, were more about protecting the office of president, but not necessarily Donald Trump, especially after November, when he's no longer a useful idiot to the Heritage Foundation and the Federalist Society, which used Trump to populate the court with extreme right-wing partisan judges like Gorsuch, Barrett, and Kavanaugh, who all committed perjury during their confirmation hearings when they said Roe was settled law. What happens once Trump is no longer useful to the Republican agenda, especially those sitting on the court? How much help can Trump then expect from this Supreme Court? I don't see how Trump wins this, and J.D. Vance is just as bad, if not worse, than he is. I don't see how he turns this around. After Arlington on Monday, all I see is J.D. Vance, Chris LaCivita, and Donald Trump making things increasingly worse. J.D. Vance yesterday literally told Kamala Harris in front of a crowd, it's on tape, "Go to hell." He said, "Go to hell," because he thought she had criticized Trump's Arlington visit. She didn't. She didn't bring it up. She wouldn't even dignify it. This behavior flies maybe when you're trying to get elected in a deep, dark red congressional district, but not on a national level. The polls I'm looking at, I know you're looking at the polls I'm looking at tell me unless Trump stanches the bleeding, he's going to sink further in these key battleground states. And this electoral map that you're looking at, this is my worst case scenario map, where Harris gets 270, Trump gets 268. Remember, Pennsylvania is still a little shaky, but she's going to pick up North Carolina. That's in the bag. And then all she needs after she gets North Carolina to replace Pennsylvania is either Georgia, Arizona, and Nevada. It's going to happen. And she's going to win Pennsylvania because the Democrats control the Supreme Court, so he can't steal it. And Josh Shapiro, he has no ground game in Pennsylvania. This is the mop-up for August 30th, 2024. I'm David Feldman in New York City. Thank you for finding me. If you would like a transcript of today's episode, go to shopdavidfeldman.com, where you can purchase the worst-case scenario map. It's on a mug, or get my big seller, I Hope You're in the Mood for Diarrhea, Chef's Apron. Donald Trump on Thursday received an official reprimand from the United States military for using Arlington Cemetery on Monday as a campaign photo op in direct violation of federal law. This after the Trump campaign posted a video of Trump walking through Arlington past grave sites as the former president called Joe Biden's withdrawal from Afghanistan a disaster that ended up killing innocent soldiers. The Army said use of Arlington in such a manner is not only illegal, but demeans the dignity of a sacred, hallowed ground reserved for American soldiers who made the ultimate sacrifice. This photo, look at him. I blurred out the names of the soldiers on the tombstones. But look at that. Thumbs up, smiling at Arlington. I think this politically is going to hurt him more, perhaps, than January 6th. The Army also confirmed that Trump campaign officials pushed a female cemetery worker trying to enforce federal law from keeping them from turning hallowed sacred ground into a photo op. Police were notified after the woman was shoved, but she didn't want to press charges. As I said yesterday, the New York Times reports that the woman who works at Arlington said she didn't want to press charges. She wanted to, but she was afraid that filing a report would result in violent retribution from Trump supporters. The only issue on the table is Donald Trump. I know we want Kamala to talk about climate change. Got to get rid of this fascist and his thugs. On Thursday, Trump's behavior grew increasingly erratic and dangerous on Truth Social and at his campaign rallies. On Thursday, Trump said the only way to fix the system is by arresting Kamala Harris, Bill Gates, and Dr. Anthony Fauci. He also called for a military tribunal charging former President Barack Obama with high treason. Trump took to social media with a picture of Kamala Harris standing next to Hillary Clinton with a caption that read, quote, "Funny how blowjobs impacted their careers differently." This is from a former president. I had to check. You can say blowjob, but should a man who wants to be president again be doing this? Trump then kept steelworkers in Potterville, Michigan, waiting 90 minutes on Thursday before he finally showed up and took the stage, where he hinted, "Are you sitting down?" He hinted that Donald Trump on Thursday hinted that he would support a Florida ballot initiative enshrining a woman's right to an abortion, adding that as president, he would make in vitro fertilization free. In vitro fertilization free. This is what he said yesterday, that he supports, he hinted that he's going to support the referendum on the ballot in Florida in November that enshrines a woman's right to an abortion. And he's going to make in vitro fertilization free. for all women. Do you see what's going on here? He's chasing people who will never vote for him, while at the same time convincing his base to stay home on election day. This is desperation, and he's just going to get worse and worse, and his poll numbers will crater. Meanwhile, J.D. Vance was greeted with boos in Boston, not booze, the kind we like, booze, boo. They booed him in Boston on Thursday after he took the stage to address the International Association of Firefighters. He is despised. And by the way, I painted his face. Full disclosure, that's not what he looks like. That's what he sees when he looks in the mirror. But I painted his face, and that's not what he looks like. We are now beginning to see the magnitude of Kamala Harris's post-convention bounce, and it's not looking pretty for Donald Trump, especially in those key battleground states. Polling averages are now showing Kamala Harris trailing Donald Trump by just 1 percentage point in Georgia. Throughout the year, Georgia was Trump country. And as I've been telling you, of the 7 battleground states, Georgia was always bound to be the hardest for Harris to win. But now, according to the polling averages, it is a statistical dead heat in Georgia, with momentum shifting considerably away from Donald Trump. This is before Labor Day. A new USA Today Suffolk University poll, A-plus poll, fresh out of the oven this morning, well, it proves even more ominous for Donald Trump. Kamala Harris now holds a commanding 5-point lead nationwide. This is an earth-shattering tectonic shift, cracking the electoral map wide open, with Trump utterly in a state of shock, especially since that same poll showed him defeating Biden only 6 weeks ago by 3 percentage points. She rose 8 percentage points in 6 weeks. We never see this kind of trajectory. So Harris holds a 5-point lead nationally in this A-plus poll. Political consultant James Carville, and this is why we're going to hear probably nobody in the Senate or the House, but some Republicans, former Republicans in October, are going to start quietly asking Mr. Trump to step aside. But he won't. Okay, she has a 5-point lead nationally in the poll. Political consultant James Carville has pointed out that while candidates for president have to win the Electoral College, not the popular vote, one of the most accurate indicators telling us which candidate will win the Electoral College is when they're leading in the national polls by 3% or more. She's leading by 5%. Not good for Trump. Okay, this is why I think some Republicans will find the courage in October. I've been told that when it comes to winning control of the House, a 3% lead in the national averages is a clear signal that control of the House is going to the party that shows a 3% lead in the national averages, because a 3% lead in the national averages is enough to paper over any advantages the opposing party might have gained through gerrymandering. So this is one poll, a good poll. She's leading nationally by 5%. The generic congressional races show a 2 to 3% lead. Trump, there's no question that the House is going to be flipped, and it's going to be because of Donald Trump. Here is where it gets even more ruinous for Donald Trump. This is just great. Kamala Harris has now taken a commanding 23-point lead among voters earning less than $20,000 a year, according to this poll. For some reason, during this election cycle, Trump was beating Biden by 3 points among this key demographic, America's working poor. Go figure. But Harris now takes the lead by 23 percentage points, which means she's creating fault lines in those hard-to-reach rural districts of Pennsylvania, Georgia, North Carolina, and who knows where else. With a 23-point lead among Americans earning less than $20,000 a year, what untold riches can be mined from this electoral map I'm showing you on October 1st and beyond? The poll also revealed a stunning shift in support for Harris among voters between the ages of 18 and 34. Last month, Donald Trump was leading that demographic by 11 points. Harris now leads it by 13 points. So she jumped 24 percentage points among the 18 to 34 demographic. This is unlike anything I've ever seen. Republicans have been attempting to harvest Hispanic voters after their disastrous 2012 election. You might remember Reince Priebus conducted a post-mortem on why Romney lost, and they decided what Republicans need to do is reach out to Hispanic voters. And so in 2016, they nominated Donald Trump, who alienated a large swath of Hispanics by cracking down on immigrants and spewing hateful rhetoric about Mexicans. However, Hispanics are not some monolithic voting bloc. Cuban Americans vote differently from Mexican Americans, and those with family ties to Central America don't necessarily share the same politics as those from South America. There is a growing evangelical base among Hispanic voters who are more responsible to Donald Trump's pro-life rhetoric, which he's backtracking on yesterday. He just said he's going to support the Florida referendum that enshrines a woman's right to choose. His campaign walked it back, but he's showing his true colors, as the National Review accused him of. The National Review last week accused him of being a pro-life New Yorker who's only paying lip service to the pro-life movement. So, back to the Hispanic vote. Over the past couple of years, we have seen more Hispanics creeping into the Republican column because of their religious beliefs and a profound concern about people entering the country legally. They say, I did it, why can't they? This is why you might remember I kept saying Marco Rubio would have been the smartest pick as Donald Trump's running mate. Yes, Rubio and Donald Trump come from the same state, Florida. But despite what some of my listeners think, there is nothing that forbids a presidential candidate and his running mate being from the same state. It only becomes an issue should the election get thrown into the House of Representatives, and even then, there are legal workarounds. He should have picked Marco Rubio, but his ego can't handle somebody who's not only smarter, but wittier than he is. Marco Rubio is incredibly sharp, but Trump couldn't handle that. He picked J.D. Vance, who hasn't even served 2 years in the Senate. He's completely inexperienced and unqualified to take the reins. Even Sarah Palin had been governor and had been a mayor, had served in government. He is totally unqualified as to become president or to be a politician. He's a disaster. Well, the Republican parties work to capture the Hispanic vote, which, while Biden was topping the ticket, it seemed like it was in their grasp all year, or at least making it a little more even. Well, all hopes of winning the Hispanic vote have been dashed. According to this new USA Today poll, Kamala Harris now leads Trump by 16 points among all Hispanic voters. In other words, during the past 6 weeks, Kamala Harris erased hundreds of millions of dollars in Republican outreach to the Hispanic community. You also might remember the news media was lousy with these bogus reports that Donald Trump was going to win the black vote. That was never happening. I told you that. But the media needed a story, and Trump fed the lie. What the news media saw were polls showing that Biden, in key battleground states, was winning the black vote by 70% instead of the 80% he had in 2020. So it wasn't going to be as big a landslide for Biden. And so the press and Trump pounced on this, saying Donald Trump is winning the black vote. It was it was irresponsible, what it was. Anyway, the new poll shows Donald Trump, when he's running against Kamala Harris, gets 12% of the black vote. According to this A+ USA Today Suffolk University poll, Donald Trump gets 12% of the black vote. This spells disaster for Trump in Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, North Carolina, and now Georgia, where this election was always going to be won by female voters in the suburbs, specifically black women who live in the suburbs. And yes, Georgia is now a dead heat according to the national polling averages. Not one specific poll. I'm talking about the national polling averages. Georgia is now a dead heat, with Trump leading by just 1 percentage point. That's well within the margin of error. And we will see Georgia start to move in Harris's favor next week as she gets another bounce. She just spent at least 2 days this week down in Georgia campaigning with Coach Walz. Aaron Blake has an interesting piece over at the Washington Post this morning about voter enthusiasm. Voter enthusiasm for Kamala Harris, which is approaching record highs not seen since Obama's 2008 victory, which, at least when it comes to the Electoral College, was a landslide. Take a look at this. Before I talk about voter enthusiasm, I want you to look at this Obama landslide from 2008, okay? You might remember that I've been telling you that a post-convention bounce would open up an electoral open up an electoral map filled with untold possibilities for Kamala Harris. So I want you to look at Obama's 2008 landslide. Get a screenshot, okay? Look at this map from 2008, and then think of Trump's rancid behavior at Arlington on Monday, that free fall, especially how he's now losing among Hispanic and low-income voters, how Harris is running ahead of Trump. 26%, she's beating Trump by 26 points among people earning less than $20,000 a year. Look at those red states, okay? This is Obama's winning map in 2008. Use your imagination. Try to imagine what the playing field is going to look like a month from now. This is Obama's victory in 2008. You need 270 to win, 270 electoral votes to win. Obama gets 365, and John McCain got 173. That is a landslide. Now, look, this is really important. Obama wins Ohio. He wins Florida. He wins Iowa, and he wins Indiana and North Carolina. He wins all of Maine. Maine is not a winner-take-all state. So I've been telling you that Trump is going to pick up parts of rural Maine, but Obama got it all. And of course, Obama won the Blue Wall, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. Just a complete blowout. And this is what keeps the Republicans up at night. Obama did not win Arizona or Georgia, but Biden did in 2020. Now, he wasn't necessarily going to win them in 2024. Maybe Arizona, probably not Georgia. Harris, however, is locked in a statistical dead heat in both Arizona and Georgia, and her situation is going to improve, especially in Arizona, where Ruben Gallego is running for Senate, destroying Kari Lake, the Republican election denier. Okay, that was Obama's landslide 16 years ago. Things change. There have been major shifts in our demographics and voting patterns. Just an example, you're now looking at the worst case scenario map. Obama won Indiana in 2008. But he lost Indiana in 2012 because it was moving increasingly red. Indiana's voting pattern now places it among the top 12 most Republican states in the country. It means they have way more Republican office holders than Democrats. When Obama won Indiana in 2008, you could still elect a Democratic senator from Indiana. Democrat Joe Donnelly was representing Indiana in the Senate as recently as 2019. But Indiana became deep red starting in 2008. Indiana, compared to other states, doesn't have as many foreign-born voters, so they're less likely to vote Democrat. And it has one of our country's largest evangelical populations. So Indiana heading into Labor Day is out of the realm of possibilities. But North Carolina has a similar story. Obama wins North Carolina in 2008, but then, like Indiana, he also loses North Carolina in 2012. North Carolina and Indiana joined the steady shift into the Republican column. Since 2012, like Indiana, North Carolina has become reliably red, with an almost identical composition of Republicans, evangelicals, and foreign-born voters as Indiana. North Carolina, not quite as red as Indiana. You could still get elected as a Democrat. But Indiana is close to North Carolina. Despite North Carolina being similar to Indiana in its voting patterns and its demographics, Kamala Harris is now leading in North Carolina. The Cook Political Report has shifted it to leaning Harris. North Carolina is in the bag. She doesn't have to worry about North Carolina. She's the beneficiary of a down-ballot governor's race in North Carolina where the Democratic candidate is obliterating the Republican. In Indiana, there's no marquee down-ballot Senate or governor's race to help Harris. But you do see how quickly things are changing. and it's not quite Labor Day. I'll get to Aaron Blake's piece in the Washington Post momentarily. There are now 66 days until the election. This election is not about issues. It's a referendum on America. I wish it weren't. I wish Donald Trump weren't running for office, but he has turned this election into a referendum on America. It is a choice between aggression versus warm and fuzzy. And so Harris, in order to win, is not going to risk alienating independents with specifics. Her interview on CNN was warm and fuzzy on climate change and how exactly she's going to make housing more affordable. She's not running against a candidate or a party that wants to govern. How do you campaign on specifics when your opponents don't understand or care, so they just lie? Back in 2000, Gore and Bush were debating each other's tax plans, and they were arguing in the debates over what to do with the budget surplus Bill Clinton was going to leave them. Yes, Bill Clinton, Democrat, left office with a budget surplus. Different time. So I don't want to hear people complain that Kamala Harris was short on substance and specifics during her big CNN interview on Thursday, because this election isn't about specifics. It should be, but Donald Trump is the nominee and he owns the Republican Party. Therefore, this election is about Donald Trump and who we are as a country. I hate that. But Donald Trump rose to power. Now, there's a great misconception about Barack Obama's first presidential campaign, his landslide. A lot of people describe his 2008 campaign as warm and fuzzy and not too heavy on specifics. Not true. In 2008, this is why I'm going to talk about Obama, how everybody compares Kamala to Obama. I'm going to tell you why Kamala doesn't need to run on specifics and can open up a map way larger than Barack Obama's. But I want to disabuse everybody of the notion that this is similar to 2008. It's partly racist to compare Obama to Kamala. It's two separate situations. It really is. And you'll notice she's not making this race about glass ceilings. I mean, it is partly about glass ceilings, obviously. She's not making it about this. Other people are. Okay. Obama's election, his landslide in 2008, was completely different from what we have going on right now. In 2008, capitalism died. The Bush administration said, we're all socialists now. They had to go hat in hand to Nancy Pelosi for a $1 trillion bailout for the banks. And they said, we're all socialists now. Alan Greenspan, the maestro, the head of the Federal Reserve, testified, well, I got some things wrong about regulation. And capitalism died in 2008. Okay? Obama, in the lead up to the presidential election, had to stake out a position on bailing out the banks. McCain blew it. He said the fundamentals of the economy are sound. And Obama, it was a big meeting in the Oval Office with McCain, George W. Bush, and Barack Obama. And Barack Obama clearly demonstrated that he understood how the financial system worked. And John McCain was an inveterate gambler, which he was, which is why many people think his plane crashed over North Vietnam. He was a risk taker who didn't understand how the economy works, okay? This was a very important, an issue-heavy election in 2008. The economy had collapsed, and one could argue that Obama's support for TARP in the lead-up to the election led to the eventual rise of Donald Trump and the faux populist grievance politics we are now subjected to. In 2008, Obama also had to stake out a position on the two wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. He promised to end Iraq in order to focus on Afghanistan. So despite a lot of people accusing Barack Obama of running on nothing but hope and change, Obama in 2008 was running on specifics, promising to bail out Wall Street while at the same time imposing extreme guardrails on the financial sector, which he did try with what's his name? Dodd-Frank. But they defanged it. Dodd-Frank is. There are some guardrails thanks to Obama and the Democrats passing Dodd-Frank, but the Republicans, when they get power, keep defanging Dodd-Frank. He was running on the war in Iraq being a lie and promising to end our involvement in Iraq and also promising to fight a smarter war on global terror in Afghanistan. I'm not going to get into that on today's show, okay? This was a substance-heavy campaign in 2008. But because Barack Obama is black, a lot of people dismissed his 2008 landslide as DEI, as an affirmative action hire, an easy win because it was finally time for a black president. No, Barack Obama won partly because most of us wanted to see a black president, but he also kicked Hillary's ass in the primaries. He won primarily because he kicked Hillary's ass in the primaries and because after 8 years of George Bush, America thirsted for Obama's competence and steady hand. Obama won on the issues. It was an issue-heavy election. But this election, whether you like it or not, is completely different. Just because we have another black person topping the ticket, it doesn't mean it's identical to 2008. It's completely different. We're not fighting two wars. The economy hasn't collapsed. We just got new numbers yesterday from the Commerce Department revising economic growth upwards for the second quarter of 2024, which ended in June. The United States economy grew at a 3% clip for the second quarter, compared to the first quarter when it was growing at 1.4%. The stock market is hitting record highs. No talk of TARP. No talk of capitalism dying. No talk of bailing out the financial sector. What we have right now is a Federal Reserve holding interest rates the highest they've been in years. He's trying to slow this economy. He can't. He cannot slow this economy. The Fed is trying to slow the economy because he believes a hot economy results in inflation. But inflation is almost where the Fed wants it. Look, well, it's distasteful to talk about the Fed because the economy doesn't work for half this country. But for the half it does work for, this economy hasn't worked this well since never. For the half of the country who this economy works for, This is record setting. Joe Biden is rewriting the shabby science of economics. Economics is not a real science. It's people are paid and bought to spew economic theories to favor the wealthy and prop up the Federal Reserve and the banks. Under Joe Biden, a lot of people have learned that fiscal spending is government spending, monetary policy is the Federal Reserve raising and lowering interest rates. When you hear the term fiscal spending, that's the government spending money. And something like 40% of our GDP is federal, state, and local government spending. We're a socialist country. 40% of our economy is what government spends. That's socialism for the wealthy. So, Joe Biden is forcing them to rewrite economic books. A lot of people are realizing what I've been telling you, and that is the chief cause of inflation is concentration of corporate power, lack of competition. A lot of people are finally waking up to the fact that the Federal Reserve can't fine-tune the economy by raising and lowering interest rates. Making money more expensive doesn't slow the economy down. Look what's going on. It just increases profits for the banks. And the banks are whom Jerome Powell, chairman of the Federal Reserve, that's who he works for. Which is why all of this, what does it all mean politically? A new Reuters Ipsos poll, A+ poll, it now shows Harris narrowing the inexplicable gap on who voters think is best equipped to handle the economy. Throughout the year, Trump, for some reason, was leading Biden by 11 points on the question of who do you think is better equipped to handle the economy? Even though Donald Trump is the first president since Herbert Hoover to leave office with fewer jobs than when he entered. He doesn't understand how tariffs work. But now, on the issue of the economy, when it comes down to Harris versus Trump, on that question, it's a dead heat. So, this is not about issues. The American people just didn't suddenly change their mind about the economy and say, I think after careful study, I've concluded that Kamala Harris's fiscal policy will eclipse that of the Federal Reserve's. This isn't about issues. It's about who do you like? Who do you trust? It's an election unlike anything we've ever seen. Harris has also narrowed the gap on crime. According to the Reuters Ipsos poll, A+. All year, Donald Trump was viewed as the law and order candidate. He sold himself as the law and order candidate, even though he was a convicted felon, and even though violent crime reached record highs during his last year in office. And violent crime and the murder rate has been heading steadily down since Biden became president. Okay? There's incontrovertible evidence that violent crime and murder spiked under Trump, came down to new record lows, especially in blue states, democratically run blue states and blue cities. And yet, the American people, because Republicans lie, are convinced or were convinced that crime was worse under Joe Biden. And now, 6 weeks later, all of a sudden, Kamala Harris has narrowed the gap on who is perceived best to fight crime. Are you telling me that American voters sat down and read the FBI reports on violent crime and the police chief's reports on violent crime and said, you know what, I believe that this is not about issues. I'm sorry. It's about trust and likability and what kind of country we want. This is an election unlike anything we've seen. We're not debating the budget, income inequality, the climate, nothing. It's, do you like Kamala Harris or do you like Donald Trump? What kind of country do you want this to be? Aggressive or pluralistic? Sorry, I'm a Bernie bro. I want to talk about income inequality. It's not on the menu. And to blame Kamala Harris for being cautious and smart in order to win over independent voters and Republicans, if you think her being vague 60 some odd days before the election, if you have a problem with that, you're an effing moron. You're an effing moron. This election isn't about the things you care about. It's about Kamala Harris or Donald Trump. We'll get to all the things you care about after she wins. But if you're going to, people are saying to me, I didn't like the CNN interview. You're an effing moron if you think she's going to, that it's smart for her to get into specifics. You're an ignoramus. Okay. Harris has narrowed the gap on the issue of crime and the economy, which in 6 weeks, all of a sudden, Americans have studied the issues and realize, oh, actually, Democrats are stronger on crime. Get the F out of here. What kind of country do you think this country's smart? It's a bunch of idiots. So look, unlike any other election in recent memory, despite all the troubles, despite the anxiety, this election is not about issues. It's about Kamala Harris or Donald Trump. And that's the way it's going to stay until November 5th. Don't tell me you're concerned that Harris seems to be shifting away from the Green New Deal or she's waffling on fracking. Get the hell out of here with that nonsense. Are you so stupid that you expect Kamala Harris to debate climate change with that orange-stained turd? Did you watch the last debate where Trump insisted water and air were the cleanest they had ever been during his administration? Yes, climate change is the issue of our time, but this election isn't about climate change. It is about Hitler. It is about Hitler. Donald Trump is so unoriginal, he's literally working off Hitler's playbook, parroting Mein Kampf. So, again, this is an entirely different election from Obama's blowout in 2008. And when people say that this is like Obama's election, it's kind of racist. I understand why people say this, okay? It's a completely different election and a completely different map. It just is. It's not even Labor Day, and we're already seeing untold possibilities. In 2008, again, we had major crises. Capitalism collapsed, and there were two bloody wars, one in Iraq and one in Afghanistan, and it looked like there was no way out of them. It's not the same. I know Gaza, Ukraine, not the same. I'm sorry. It's horrible, absolutely horrid, but politically, it's not the same. This election favors Harris in ways I don't think we quite yet comprehend. Because there are two crises in this election. There are. Those two crises are Donald Trump and abortion. That's it. And there's no debate on what to do about either one of them. There are no gray areas when it comes to Trump or abortion. You can't spin Trump anymore. You can't. You cannot make excuses for Donald Trump. You can't say, well, he's just saying this because he doesn't mean it. We all saw January 6th, and we all saw what happened at Arlington on Monday. And you cannot spin abortion. You're either for abortion or you're not. You're either for Trump or you're against him. And a majority of Americans are against Trump. When you look at the favorability ratings of Harris and Coach Walz, they're above water. Donald Trump and J.D. Vance are underwater, 10 points in some polls underwater. J.D. Vance is the most unpopular running mate in modern American history. That's the election. It's what it's about. You're either for abortion or you're against abortion, and 63% of Americans believe abortion should be legal in most cases, which is why a panic-stricken Donald Trump yesterday said, I would support the referendum in Florida enshrining a woman's right to choose in Florida. Last week he said, my presidency will be very strong on reproductive freedom. This is how you lose. Look at the map, and you tell me how big he's going to lose. In 2008, you could argue and debate issues. Should we save the banks? Should we bail out GM? You could argue nuance. McCain and Obama and the Republicans could argue how exactly to end the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. And American voters could be tricked and deceived and spun because the economy and those two wars require a lot of knowledge, a lot of focus, and a lot of concentration. Well, those two, Afghanistan and Iraq, we're not there. Ukraine and Gaza, I don't want to, you can't overstate what a tragedy it is. But politically, Gaza and Ukraine politically are not the same as Iraq and Ukraine. Okay? Gaza should be, but it's not. So this election has none of what was going on in 2008. None of it. Because for this election, you don't have to study up on things. You don't need to pay attention to the issues when this election is and only is a referendum on Donald Trump and reproductive freedom. This is as clear-cut an election as we're going to see in our lifetime. And it favors Kamala Harris. 4 years ago, we were a nation in crisis. Donald Trump was president. There was COVID. The entire economy was shut down. But this election, there are crises, but they are not comparable to 4 years ago or 2008 because Joe Biden saved America. This election, we have the luxury, thanks to Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, to make this election a referendum on what kind of country we want to be. This is a once-in-a-generation opportunity to define ourselves. Without the conversation, and I'm being serious here, we get to define who we are without the conversation becoming cloudy with specifics. This show is all about specifics, right? This is an election that we look at 30,000 feet from above. This is an election that historians will study because it's who we are as a country. Joe Biden said that in 2020, and that was partly true, but it was clouded by crises. There's no crisis now. This is a philosophical argument, not burdened by reality. Again, I'm not diminishing what's going on in Gaza, Ukraine. Half the country can't come up with $500 for an emergency. There are real crises in this country. Politically, when you look at the polling, though, this election is not burdened by them, which is why Donald Trump has to invent a migrant crisis and just lie and paint America as an apocalyptic hellscape, which it isn't. And I'm just going over the polling. So, none of those issues that I care about and you care about, for better or worse, when you talk about Gaza, Ukraine, climate change, gun violence, and income inequality, for better or worse, those issues are important, but they're not making voters feel like the wolf is at the door. Voters aren't as scared as they were in 2008 or 2020. Now, we're divided, we're angry, we're paranoid, we're anxious, but we're not scared, except for two things. Voters are terrified. They're terrified Donald Trump is going to become president and never leave, and they are terrified that Republicans will take away our freedom, our reproductive freedom. Unlike all the other elections in recent memory, this time we can do something about those two big issues. You vote for Kamala Harris. It's that simple. The choice is that simple. We're not burdened by reality in this election. We're burdened by the reality of Trump and a 16-year-old girl in Texas has to carry her stepfather's baby. Those are big issues. And that's all this election. From what I'm seeing from the polls, that's what this election is about. Donald Trump and reproductive freedom. Women. That's it. So, it's not yet Labor Day. We are hearing reports of turmoil inside the Trump campaign. Corey Lewandowski, remember him, Trump's first campaign manager from 2016, who had to quit because he was accused of physically assaulting a female reporter and then was accused of sexually harassing and assaulting other women, including the wife of a wealthy Republican donor. Corey Lewandowski has been brought into the Trump campaign as a minister without portfolio, and they're the most dangerous. He has no official job title. He's just floating around stirring up crap. And he's making Trump's current campaign manager, Chris LaCivita, feel like he's not in charge, which may explain the violence against women we saw Monday at Arlington Cemetery, the shoving of that female employee at Arlington. Trump, with Corey Lewandowski, is putting everyone on edge, making them prove their loyalty, prove how tough you are, prove to me how hard you're willing to fight for me. And so they pushed and shoved a woman, which in the mind of a fascist signals strength. That's straight out of the fascist playbook. Violence towards women. We're getting reports that Trump is betting everything on the September 10th debate, and people close to him say they have no idea, they're terrified, how he will begin to respond on September 11th when the debate doesn't flip the narrative. They are terrified. They have no idea how he will respond when the polls refuse to budge. We are looking at the distinct possibility that by September 11th, Trump realizes it's over. No way he's going to turn it around. And then he starts getting poked by the Justice Department, by our courts. The E. Jean Carroll trial resumes. There are going to be hearings for both the election interference case in D.C. and the classified documents case. His behavior at Arlington on Monday had echoes of January 6th. But there isn't going to be a January 6th because Joe Biden is president. Trump is truly powerless this time. All he can do is hold rallies and give interviews. And during the 6 weeks, was it 6 weeks after September 11th, when he can't jumpstart the campaign, he will become increasingly erratic. People will jump ship. He will sink further and further in the polls. I think, especially after what happened at Arlington Cemetery on Monday, I think by Monday, he's going to realize this thing is over. And then everything he does in September will be a desperate act that will make him crater even deeper in the polls. If he's saying before Labor Day that he supports the referendum in Florida enshrining a woman's right to choose, if he's saying this before Labor Day, if he's saying in vitro fertilization in America will be free when I'm president, if he's saying this before Labor Day, if he's saying my administration will be great for reproductive freedom, if he's saying this before Labor Day, what is he going to be saying in September that makes him just hit new lows? Look at this map. It's Obama. It's his landslide from 2008. Ohio, Indiana, Florida, and Iowa are blue. Okay? I'm going to be responsible here and tell you that as of this morning, Ohio, Indiana, Florida, Iowa are off the table for Harris. Out of the question. But it's not September yet. She's already put Georgia into a statistical dead heat, with some polls showing her leading Georgia. She has a 26% lead among voters who earn less than $20,000 a year. Look at how red, look how rural this map is. You tell me what fault lines she can create. Let me ask you a question. Please, I read your comments, and so I have a question for my listeners. Do you think Donald Trump, seriously, I get things wrong. I said this election was going to be over on June 27th after the debate. I got that completely wrong. But I get a lot of things right. You know that. If you listen to this show, I get a lot of things right. Do you think Donald Trump can turn this around? Do you think he has the gas to turn this around? Do you think the script gets flipped right after September 10th? Because that's when he's got to do it. Early voting starts September 6th. Early voting starts. Or do you think he's going to panic and make things worse? That is his painted face, full disclosure. I know it's hard to tell, but I painted his face. That's what I do. I used to paint mustache when I was an adolescent. I used to paint mustaches and beards and give zits to famous people on magazine covers. Now it's devolved into this kind of self-destructive behavior. And this would be a much better show if I wasn't trying to learn After Effects. I know this, but this is how I cope with evil. Do you think Donald Trump, I'm curious, and J.D. Vance have any ideas how to keep their plane in the air? And what do you think this is going to look like by October 1st? You know, Trump is going to be unleashed. He's going to be unleashed in September because he brought back Corey Lewandowski, who's the minister without portfolio, who's telling everybody, let Trump be Trump. Let Trump be Trump. If Trump is allowed to be Trump, what do you think the electoral map will be looking like 1 month from today? Short of Donald Trump getting psychiatric help, I think we're looking at a sea of blue. I don't know. Aaron Blake over at the Washington Post writes about this new Gallup poll. Now, the Gallup organization used to be respected. They're not, I mean, the Rasmussen poll is the worst. It's a the Gallup poll, it's a brand, but it's not up there with the polls that I normally quote. The YouGov poll that I pay for is on a granular level. It's like learning After Effects. It's fascinating. But Aaron Blake over at the Washington Post writes about this new Gallup poll, and it reveals an enthusiasm gap between Trump voters and Harris voters. 78% of Democrats now say they can't wait to cast their ballot for Kamala Harris, while only 64% of Republicans say they can't wait to vote for Trump. That's a huge gap. Enthusiasm. Now, I talked about likability. I explained why likability is so important on previous shows. Enthusiasm is a leading indicator of how an election plays out. Enthusiasm is why black people in Georgia will stand in line for 3 hours to vote for Kamala Harris. Brian Kemp, the Republican governor, has scrubbed black people from the voting rolls. They passed these draconian laws. They cut funding in black precincts so there aren't as many poll workers. Enthusiasm is why black voters will wait in line for 3 hours to vote in Georgia. Aaron Blake says Kamala Harris is approaching creating an enthusiasm gap not witnessed since Obama in 2008. So, Donald Trump, I'm wrapping it up. Donald Trump, right now, only has 2 weapons in his arsenal: racism and misogyny. That's it. Racism and misogyny. Because of Donald Trump, this election is being reduced, and it will be reduced by October, will come down to racism and misogyny. As he panics, as he fires people and screams and I can't trust you, he's going to trust his instincts. Trump is going to be Trump. They're going to let Trump be Trump. And if Trump is Trump, this campaign is reduced to racism and misogyny. By October, maybe I'm wrong, let me know in the comments section, but I believe by October, this election will not be about abortion or reproductive freedom, because Donald Trump will go much deeper. Donald Trump, by October, I believe, will try to win this by pulling out the most rancid political moves. He's going to pull them from the bottom of the barrel. This election, by October 1st, will come down to two questions. How many Americans hate women, and how many Americans hate black women? That's what this election is going to be about. Trump might have been able to win, reducing the election down to those two questions back in 1968. He might have even been able to pull it off as recently as 1988. Country has changed. I would say sit back and enjoy the show, but you can't sit back. Got to get to work. This election determines who we are. Who we are. JohnTester.com. 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 Yes, it will be great to watch Donald Trump get what's coming to him. But unless Jon Tester wins his Senate race, I know I'm repetitive, but I cannot emphasize this enough. Unless Jon Tester wins Montana, President Harris's agenda will be dead on arrival. She will be the first president since George W. Bush not to have the trifecta. Obama, Biden, Trump all had the trifecta their first 2 years in office. They all had control. Their party controlled the Senate and the House, and that's why they were able to, Trump was able to get that tax cut for the richest 1% passed that tacked on $8 trillion to our national debt. If we don't win the Senate, and specifically Jon Tester in Montana, you think Kamala Harris's interview with CNN was light on substance? Wait till she's got to deal with a Republican-controlled Senate. I'm David Feldman, reminding you to stay strong, protect the weak, and get to work on re-electing Jon Tester in Montana. You can donate if you're an American citizen or if you have a green card, but the most effective way is to call over at JohnTester.com and phone bank. And if you have a week off and you have money, go to Montana and knock on doors. I'm being serious. I would do that, but they don't want a loudmouth New Yorker. Montana they don't want to nationalize this campaign. Montana voters have said in the polls, if this gets nationalized, if they begin to think this election is about control of the Senate, as opposed to Jon Tester, then they're not going to vote for Jon Tester. Jon Tester is one of the most beloved politicians in America. He has consistently had the highest approval rating among his constituents than any other U.S. senator because he represents the people of Montana. He's a Democrat. He's in a tough state to win. If this election gets nationalized, it's problematic. The people of Montana, they hate people from California moving in and raising property values and making purchase of a home or rent out of the question. So they don't like people from outside coming in. So I'm not going to Montana. I don't think I can be of any help. But I'm going to do more phone banking, JohnTester.com. If he doesn't win, not good. Thank you for joining me. This has been the mop-up for, what date is it? Is it August 30th, 2024? Thank you to Bob in the chat room for keeping the conversation civil. I read all your comments. If you would like a transcript of today's show, it's completely free. Go to shopdavidfeldman.com. It's free because of the morons who purchase crap over at shopdavidfeldman.com, like my Still a Democrat mug, the Made in Los Estados Unidos mug, the Albert Einstein mug, where he says I'm surrounded by idiots, and I made a mug of my worst case scenario map. It's a great souvenir for the 2024 presidential election. And, or if you want to disabuse me of my delusion that I run a smart show and that I've cultivated a sophisticated audience, my number one seller is this. It is a chef's apron emblazoned with the words, "I hope you're in the mood for diarrhea." Outsells everything. It breaks my heart. I do all this research, talk to people, find out what's going on. I prep, and my listeners thank me by purchasing the "I hope you're in the mood for diarrhea" chef's apron. How do you think that makes me feel? What a hostile gesture to purchase that chef's apron. We have some Halloween things we're working on that are going to be really tasteless. I don't even know if I'm going to show them to you because I think you're going to have to go to my site. I think Halloween will offer the opportunity to be, anyway. Leave a comment. Thank you so much. Thank you to everybody in the chat room. And yes, another show tomorrow. Bye.